Welcome, everyone. This is Ron Bush with Ron Bush Consulting, and you're joining the Information Playground. I say it that way because you may be joining us on WVLP. That's a FM radio station in Valparaiso, Indiana. And if you're joining us there, it could be at 103.1 FM if you're local, or streaming us through WVLP.org. They're a great local radio station, active in the community. And I really hope you check out their website. Maybe underwrite some of the programs. You're welcome to underwrite the Information Playground, of course, but they've got some other fine programs as well. If you might be catching us on demand, by the way, with WVLP, we're on Monday mornings from 8 to 9 a.m. and Friday afternoons from 1 to 2. You may be catching us on demand through any of the podcast platforms. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all the rest of them, or at least the ones that I'm familiar with. Or you might be catching us on YouTube under the Information Playground on either platform. I've now turned my ringer off, so as we proceed down the day. My good friend Larry Young is with us this morning, and he suggested that he turn the tables on us. He's going to interview me, so bear with us. I'll probably be a little awkward with it, but I'm sure he'll be great as always. Larry, tell the folks a little bit about yourself and what you do before you turn the spotlight on me.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for having me on. My name is Larry Young. I'm with Boiling Frog Development, is the company that I own, and we help successful companies that want to grow to the next level, who finally realize that what got them where they are won't get them to that next level. And so we help them through business development strategy and sales process and mapping. And boy, do we have fun with it. But we're gonna have fun today, aren't we, Ron? So I had suggested that we turn the tables. You know, I've been on your show, what, 6-7 times now?
Probably.
Yeah, probably somewhere in there. And so I thought it fitting that maybe, you know, the student had become the teacher, right? Is that kind of the saying, right? So this is not only this is the first time you've been interviewed on your show, it's the first time I've done a podcast interview. So we'll kind of muddle through that. How's that sound?
That sounds great. Double treat for everybody.
That's right. That's right. That's right. So are you ready to get started on the grilling for your listeners? We're going to grill you on cybersecurity. Now, I tell you, I've been a big fan of yours, you know, we've known each other for about 3 years now, and then you own Ron Bush Consulting. You're a well-known speaker and author. This is the topic that you love. And I love the fact that although I do something different, what you do is very similar in that you help businesses succeed, right, through protecting themselves and whatnot, and being able to position themselves so they don't have the loss, you know, or risk their business. And you've been doing that for a while now.
Yes, sir. Yeah, going on 12 years.
Yeah. Well, I want to start out, you know, sometimes, you know, kind of, it's a world in which there's a lot of gloss and flair in the news, you know, if you will, and you hear a lot of big stories and stuff. But I want to start with Ron Bush Consulting and what you do. You do a number of things from risk assessment. You do policies and procedures. You help companies, employee training. So I might be stealing some of your thunder with this next question. You also do a lot of the cybersecurity. But tell me, what does a cybersecurity consultant do, Ron?
Oh, excellent question. And honestly, I appreciate the question because I'm sure a lot of folks have no idea.
Yeah.
So a cybersecurity professional, there are several ways to look at this. From a consulting standpoint, I often advise people through a risk assessment, through employee training, just through speaking on best practices. I often advise people of things they can do to make their data safer. Now that's consulting. A risk assessment just means that I'll come in, I will look at first the physical perimeter, then I'll get into people, because I want to look at all the different ways that an attack can happen. It can happen physically, it can happen through social engineering, it can happen over the phone, over text, over email. 90% of viruses are delivered via email. So that's really a big subject, but you know, they can walk through the front door too. And often I give an example of that in speaking, where I come in, I'm dressed in a suit. I tell people I'm getting ready to go for a job interview. Somebody ran out in front of me, usually a little girl ran out in front of me. She's okay. But I spilled coffee all over my resumes. Would you mind printing off one? And I want to hand them a thumb drive. That's social engineering. I've convinced you to do something for me. I've basically manipulated you into now installing a virus on your network as soon as you stick that thumb drive in there. So that's one part. Another part would be from a managed services standpoint. So I advise you, or that you need intrusion detection devices or protection devices. That you need firewall, whatever the case might be. Update your antivirus, and that's what I do. If you don't have a provider, it may be that you have an IT department, but maybe they're understaffed and overwhelmed with issues. IT really today has the job of keeping the printers running and the systems all running and keeping everything up to date. They really don't have time for a lot of things unless they're well staffed, and depends on the industry, depends on the company, of course, but a lot of companies, that's the last place they want to spend money. The owner doesn't really understand it, or the board doesn't really understand IT. And so they hesitate to spend money where they don't feel it's needed. They would much rather spend it on advertising. They would much rather spend it on stock options or other things. Other things come into play. And so a budget for cybersecurity just isn't always there, or even for IT. The other way is to really bring people to the public speaking side. Oftentimes they have no idea of anything. And I kind of pride myself really in being able to speak English as well as geek. And so I try to live in both worlds. And the English parts helps the business owner, business managers. Most of them don't speak geek. They need it in English. And so.
Yeah. A lot of times for us on the other side, your listeners and I, especially technologically challenged, when it's talked over our heads, sometimes we crawl into a ball, if you will, and think that it'll never, affect us, so to speak. I'm kind of interested in how you really help your clients, and I'd like to go through, if I could, and you've got a fantastic website that kind of lays this out, but I think a lot of times, and that's probably where the consultant piece comes in, the risk assessment. Sometimes now I'm speaking on behalf of me and probably some of your listeners, in the fact that a lot of times we don't know what we don't know, right? And so I imagine the risk assessment is kind of a tool that you use to try to understand my needs. Is that fair?
Oh, very, very fair. So let's say that you have a business, you've grown from 5 employees. Over the last few years, you've gone to 10 or 15 employees. Chances are, when I do a risk assessment, I'm going to walk in, you may have outgrown your space, you may have grown into a new space, a bigger space, or you may just almost have people's desk on top of each other practically.
Yeah.
I encounter both. I also encounter it the other way, where you've shrunk. Either you've automated things or your business has dropped off. And now you have more space and more, you don't have the business, the income coming in, the revenue to substantiate more people or more costs. And so I look at it both ways. If I walk in the door and I find it really easy, first thing that you learn is if you walk into a place and you act like you belong there, nobody's going to challenge you. Nobody.
Yeah.
So if I can walk in and I can walk around anywhere I want to and do anything I want to, that's the first thing I'm going to talk to you about is perimeter defense. You need to train your employees, and it almost always comes back to education. You've got to train employees what to look for, what to stop, what to allow, what not to. You've got to train them to, it's called tailgating. if I'm coming in on second shift and I just follow the last guy in the door when they walk in, it doesn't matter if it's a locked facility. Nobody's going to challenge me if I act like I belong there.
Yeah.
Chances are. And so, so it always comes back to training, but I'll look around. Eventually I'll get to the network and all the stuff that you would expect me to, the technological things. But that's not where it starts. It really starts in being aware, knowing what the risks are, because really at the end of the day, cybersecurity is really just risk management. And if you don't know what those risks are, you don't know how to manage them.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's symbolic when you talk about the perimeter. When I worked in the corporate world and especially in the banking back when I was there, we protected the perimeter, from bad individuals. But with cybersecurity, it's not only it's really not just the borders. It's the computers, it's the systems, it's the protecting of those, which I think ties into, like your policies and procedures. I think you help companies develop policies, procedures, and whatnot. I'm curious though, for all of us, how, just as a percentage, how many companies do you walk into that don't have policies and procedures?
Oh, the vast majority.
Really? That many?
If you're in healthcare, you're required by HIPAA to have information security policies and procedures. I have yet to walk into a doctor's office that had any. It never happened. Hospitals, yeah, they do, because they're afraid of being audited by Health and Human Services, but not your individual practitioners, not your dentists, not your chiropractors.
Wow.
None of those medical professionals who are required under HIPAA to have them, none of them do. They just don't. Now you get into the larger clinics. Now you run the risk of being audited, and again, you do find kind of hit or miss. It's usually the hospitals where I find them, and in any other industry, other than financial services, I can't think of a time I have ever run into it. They just don't. Now, Fortune 500, different because you've got your high profile, but financial services, they're different simply because usually in a stock trader example, the brokerage is going to take care of that. If you're in insurance sales, chances are your insurance broker will take care of that. But if you're just a general agent by yourself, maybe you don't have those things going for you. You probably won't have information security policies and procedures. And there is no other industry that you're likely to find it unless you're a Fortune 500 company.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. You think about policies and procedures are really on two sides of it are really no good if you don't have a risk assessment, right? Because I may be planning for something I'm really not preparing for. So isn't there kind of a saying that you can get anywhere you want to go if you don't have a map, right?
Right.
And so the risk assessment, I assume, is you going in and questioning people. And what do you think about, again, goes back to the what I don't know. I want to know what I don't know, excuse me. And so then you can build policies and procedures. I'm curious though, then on the flip side of that, out of the people that do have policies and procedures, how many of them do you think actually train on it? Like actually take it to the people?
Excellent question. Even after I've helped them develop policies and procedures, if they don't bring me back to continue to train employees, it's like a book that goes on a shelf. Yeah, we've got it right over there. But never do they do. And I've had clients like that. I've had clients where I've come in, I've done risk assessment, I've written their policies and procedures, I've trained their existing employees, but then the next year rolls around or the next quarter rolls around. Ron, we've got too much going on, or Ron, that's been a lousy year for us. We just can't afford to bring you in, or Ron, we just, things are too unpredictable. This pandemic has been a real problem there because people we're in uncharted territories. They didn't know what to do. And so now I come back and they've hired 3 new people. They've lost 2. They've had turnover. They now have new systems. That information security policies and procedures, you can have the best on the planet, but if nobody knows what they are, it doesn't matter. And if they don't know how to access them, it doesn't matter. And if they're not continually trained in it, when the stuff happens, then they don't think of it. They may know what to do with a suspicious email, but in the heat of the moment, the phone's ringing, people are coming in the front door, and they get this email. Well, they don't think because they haven't had recent training. They just aren't thinking that way, and they click on it. And now they've installed ransomware, which is taking over their network.
Yeah.
Now everything comes to a stop.
Yeah. I would imagine, what do you advise companies that you've gone in and done the risk assessment? Do you recommend like quarterly training, monthly training, or is it part of the new employee orientation? I mean, what do you recommend?
Excellent question. So I recommend it. Now, first off, it depends on the company. It depends on the activity level. It depends on the industry even. Once again, financial services, things move really fast. You've got a lot of different regulations to adhere to. Healthcare, HIPAA probably has the most teeth of any particular regulation out there. You may want to do quarterly assessments. You certainly want to do quarterly training. You may be able to get away with annual both, but it depends on your activity level. It depends on what you do. It depends on your, do you mostly sell over the internet? Is your income generated from your website, or is it generated from your location? Are you brick and mortar, or do you telephone sales? How do you where does the income come from, and what's your profile like? At the end of the day, no matter who you are or what you are, there's phishing simulation products. I sell some. There are others available on the market. I think every company ought to be using that, because that's the way 90% or more of all viruses are delivered. So if you're not thinking that way, then chances are that's the way you'll get hit. That will be your downfall. If you've got the phishing simulation, then on a regular basis, you're going to get hit with a fake one. And it will say, guess what? You clicked on the wrong thing. Here's a video to remind you what to look for and how to avoid that. Well, most people don't want to sit there and watch the video, so they will look at every email, not knowing which one will be the fake and which one won't. So
I want to dig into that a little bit further. That's fascinating, and just in the fact that you had said earlier that most ransomware and things are delivered by email, and we've had this conversation in the past. But tell me about, I think I'm going to use the wrong word, but you said simulation or fake. Is that a program that a company purchases to test their employees, if you will?
Definitely. So I've got a couple of vendors that I use and recommend. Defendify is one, which they bundle a host of things together, and they include phishing simulation in there, where they send out a rogue email, if you will. It looks legit. It looks like it belongs like all the rest of your emails that you're going to get. But when you click on that, instead of installing ransomware, it'll just basically tell you this was not a valid email. You shouldn't have clicked on this for this reason. The granddaddy in this arena is KnowBe4. They're the ones that pretty much pioneered the area. They've been around for a good decade. Those of you that have heard me recommend Michael or Kevin Mitnick, rather, he's a guy that was a hacker himself. FBI busted him. He did his time, came out, and now he calls himself the featured hacker or the main hacker with KnowBe4.
Okay.
But they do an excellent job. One is for a large corporation. The other one's for a smaller business. Both of them do great work at what they do.
That's awesome. I think I told you on one of your podcasts, it's probably been months and months ago, but I told the story of how, in the banking world, you had security and protocols for employees to enter the bank in the beginning. And we used to be really bad at it, and so I used to run these fake drills, where the employees would come in. If they didn't follow it, I sat there with one of my little boy's Nerf guns and shot him with the Nerf thing, as a simulation for a robbery. Basically, you didn't follow it and you put yourself and others in jeopardy, type of thing. And so it seems like that simulation is a great tool to kind of keep it top of mind for people.
It is.
and
It
and
is. You're
that
exactly
and
right.
yeah, I mean, again, like you said, most of those manuals, sometimes you go to the work of the risk assessment, the policies and procedures, and now I feel good, right? I
Uh-huh.
feel good, like, yeah, I've done it, now I feel strong. But at the end of the day, if people aren't carrying it out, it does no good.
Exactly.
Interesting. On I think it was probably 4 or 5 months ago, Ron, I told the quick story. You remember that of the pest company, where the pest company came out to my house and I hired them, and then it was bug Armageddon. Then the next time they come out, there was nothing, and then the next there was no bugs. And so after about 6 7 months of seeing no bugs, I'm in my mind, I'm like, well, is this really doing anything? Am I paying this money per month, and is it actually doing anything? And I tell your listeners that story quick because I think from our chair, Ron, I think sometimes it's easy for business owners to think that way about cybersecurity, in the fact that, well, I haven't been hacked, so is this really real, right? Or is it potentially, am I paying this money and is it really protecting me from anything? I mean, I just had something come up that cleans my computer that said it cleaned out, 800 trackers or whatever, and I'm thinking, is that a real number? My point to all of this is maybe you could tell the listeners a little bit about what's happening on a national sense, on a global sense, with cybersecurity, in the fact that it is real.
I appreciate that, and I love your I love your introduction to the question, because you're exactly right. Sometimes people, when they don't experience an attack, they wonder if all of this stuff is true.
Yeah.
Is it real? The end of 2020, and I mean, I don't want to sit here and throw numbers. Nobody, after a while, everybody's eyes start to glaze over. You throw enough numbers at them. But 2020 was really one of the worst years on record, and they have done nothing but grow exponentially every year. I mean, you can talk about the first of the beginning, I guess, of cybercrime, really way back in the 60s. You could make a case for there having been some, even though the internet didn't even exist back then. But the 90s things started to take off. The first decade of the 2000s, they have just every year just saw more and more, not just numbers of attacks, but inventive types of attacks. This last decade, up through 2020, once again, just off the charts. And now we've reached a point where you've got some of the most creative minds in this arena are working for the bad guys. The bad guys, really, the money to be made in cybercrime. Now, if you're in the U.S., it's a risky proposition, because we have laws that protect us, and we'll put people in jail. If you're in just about any other country on the planet, and there's exceptions to that, but almost every other country, you can sit there as long as your focus is maintained on America, you can get away with most things. Now, you breach the Pentagon or the NSA, things like that. Well, now you have some issues,
Yeah.
but that's it. And so what we find is the level of attacks. In December, we had major attack, SolarWinds, which was at that time called the worst breach in history. SolarWinds attack. SolarWinds is a cybersecurity company, which makes it a little worse because they had other cybersecurities. FireEye's probably the largest cybersecurity company on the planet. Well, they're one of SolarWinds' customers. One of their update, and maybe we'll talk about updates. It depends on if you ask me about them, but it's one of the main things that everyone should do. But if you've got thousands and thousands of computers, well, you don't have the ability to do your own updates, chances are. So
Right.
you pay somebody like SolarWinds, and in particular their Orion service, to do all of your updates. The hackers, and we aren't exactly sure who they are, and there's evidence there may be quite a few of them, not just one group. The blame falls first on Russia, And that's who the government has really pointed its fingers at. But it's believed that there are other groups, other Russian groups other than the one they've identified, but also other hacker groups around the planet that are involved in this. The problem with this is the Orion system is extremely expensive. It's only your largest corporations. They had around 18,000 customers. A good many of them are large federal agencies, like the Department of Justice is one of them. That's pretty bad. That's we depend on a lot. But the Treasury Department, all of those, they were taken down in that, and they've seen evidences of attacks based on the data that was stolen through the SolarWinds attack. It was also, I've read, as high as 482 of the Fortune 500 corporations also their data stolen in that attack.
Wow. Wow.
You add to that Extortion, which was reported in January. And by the way, that SolarWinds attack happened for around 9 months before it was discovered. So they were in there for 9 months, and it's estimated there's a lot of back doors built in that we haven't found yet, as hard as we're looking. Extortion has Kroger departments or grocery store chain, but has a good many, if not most, of your large corporations. They have an FTP service. If you upload large files across the internet, you're going to use something. And Extortion had a 20-year-old software. They were getting ready to end the life, is what it's called, in the end of life of that software. Sometime probably around April or May of 2021, but they hadn't done it yet. And they discovered in January they'd been hacked. And some of your largest law firms, some of your other largest companies around the planet were there, and they've discovered they're basically on a list. They're taking 4 or 5 a month and just plowing through each one of them, hacking them either through ransomware or through direct attacks, whatever data they've stolen. And then you add to that Microsoft, and now they're pointing the finger at China, but it's also beginning to be believed there are other groups in there besides that. They have 300,000 Microsoft Exchange servers around the planet. 30,000 of them are in America, and that's the server. You've got these are large companies, because small mom and pops don't use Microsoft Exchange servers. Mm-hmm. These are large corporations, and once you steal their data, you've got a whole list of individuals and other companies now that you can steal from and attack. And that's where it's going.
Wow. So it's big dollars. Ron, we've got just a couple minutes till we get up to break, and after break, I do want to talk about updates and focus on what we can do to protect. But with just a couple minutes left, I read that now they're kind of using ransomware going after like the industrial sector or certain sectors that, that downtime is big money where they're forcing companies to pay. And I think that's kind of a trend that you see, pay to get out of jail, so to speak.
Yeah. Extortion has been around for a long time, and extortion is part of cybercrime, has been around for a long time. But these guys have taken it to a new level starting last year. Well, actually 2019 too, but it became real popular in 2020, and 2021 has seen just that many more instances of it. If I want to attack you and I want to steal, let's say, your data, if I've taken you down, and the first question you've got to ask is, how long can you afford to be down? Yeah. If your income is over the internet, well, I take down your website, I stop your income. How long can you last? If you've got people that need to work, employees that need to work on your systems, you're going to pay them. You've got to have some production out of them, and I take down your network. How long can you stay down? So there's the first thing. I'll keep you down as long as I need to, either through DDoS attacks or through ransomware, for you to pay me what I want you to pay me. And then if you don't, maybe I'll just take all that data that I've stolen from you and I'll just publish it on the World Wide Web. You don't want your competitors to know who your clients are or who you're using for different sources. Great. I'll tell the whole world, including your competitors.
Wow, that's crazy. Yeah. A lot of unethical behavior out there. And of course, as you said, it's not like they're next door. they could be thousands of miles away and whatnot. Very scary, very scary. Well, Ron, I'm going to let you take us to break here. We're right at the halfway mark, and when we come back, I do want to talk about updates and really focus on what we can do to start protecting ourselves.
Great. I appreciate that. Let me start with you, Larry. Tell folks how to get a hold of you, and then I'll launch into all the rest.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, my name's Larry Young. My company is Boiling Frog Development. I can be reached at boilingfrogdevelopment.com, Facebook at Boiling Frog Development, of course, LinkedIn under Larry Young, or you can email me directly at boilingfrogdevelopment@gmail.com.
Great, great. Well, I'm Ron Bush. I own Ron Bush Consulting, and as we've been discussing, it's an information security company. We consult with other businesses and organizations to help them keep their data, their clients, and their employees safe. But we broadcast the information playground in a number of different arenas. So I hope you're joining us on WVLP. That's a great local radio station, community radio station. You can check them out at wvlp.org. If you're local in Valparaiso, Indiana, it's 103.1 FM. Otherwise, stream us on wvlp.org. We're broadcast on Monday mornings from 8 to 9 and Friday afternoons rebroadcast from 1 to 2 p.m. You can also find us on demand on just about any of the podcast platforms under The Information Playground. All three words, I find that all three of those words are popular for podcast names. So it's The Information Playground. Or you can find us on YouTube, where you get to see Larry and my smiling faces. We talk about all this stuff today. The Information Playground at any of those sources. And thank you for being with us. If you're interested in underwriting, either on WVLP or on YouTube or any of the podcasts, let me know. Ron at ronbushconsulting.com. Back to you, sir.
All right, you're passing the baton back to me. You're ready. You're ready for more, right? Now, this is a great topic because it's so relevant out there and it's scary, right? And we had talked about, earlier about whether you knew if it was real, and it's real. I mean, data is being stolen, and you think about it. These are big companies that have big IT departments that are being and then there's people like me, a solopreneur, or maybe you have 5 or 10 employees. I thought one of the things that caught my attention for all of your listeners to try to go to your website, the ronbushconsulting.com. You've got some great blogs out there. You've got access to the videos that you were just mentioned. But one of the caught my eye, and I want to embellish on, scared me actually, but in the blog, you were talking about why businesses need more than just policies and procedures. It was a blog you did about 6 months ago, but you were talking about, I think you used the story of Jeffrey Epstein, and you could insert any story, but the idea was that these cyber criminals are finding stories that are hot, like right now, and they're quickly building websites that, whether it's SEO, get to the top, I assume, yeah. and you click on there and you're trying to read, and there's malware and malicious activity. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Right. Well, excellent question. So first off, hackers watch the news. Cyber criminals know what's going on. In fact, they may have some of them may have a better feel for the pulse of the planet than the rest of us do. Because when there's any kind of event that they might be able to turn to their benefit. Now, whether that's the pandemic or it's a hurricane or a tornado, damage from a tornado or a major fire, regardless of what it is, they'll easily come on, they'll create a website. In fact, there were hundreds of thousands of them created in the first half of 2020 dealing with the pandemic. If you wanted to donate, Red Cross has been spoofed several times because they do a lot of work in this area. But that's not to cut down on the gifts you give the Red Cross, but be sure you're dealing with the Red Cross. Don't click on a link to get there. Go there on your own and make sure that you're with the bona fide Red Cross. So they'll take the opportunity of the moment and they'll turn it to their advantage. And they can do that usually through email, but not always. They can pick up the phone and just have a bank of telecallers, telesolicitors, or marketers, you might call them, that are, would you like to donate to this cause or to that cause? and they will send you the link. Let me have your email and I'll send you the link to donate, or they'll give it to you. Of course, you're not going to a legitimate website, you're going to their website. And maybe there's a place to give and maybe there's not. Maybe it's not a good website. Maybe they've spoofed you somehow and they've just directed you to their website where they now have different type of malicious software on their website. You may click around to try and find the place to give, and you may even give. So they'll take your credit card. Now they've got that to come back with and charge other things, but they also have everything else, including they've just planted or installed virus on your computer. So now you've got not only all your information is out there, they now have either a virus on your computer or a backdoor to come and go as they please. They can have what's called a RAT, a remote access Trojan on your machine. If you're using a laptop or something with a mic and a camera, they control that. So they can listen to all your conversations and record them. They don't have to turn the red light on to let you know that your mic's on or that your camera's on. They can record a very famous incident was back in 2013 with Miss Teen USA, who was hacked by a boy in her class with the Black Shades virus, remote access Trojan. He bought it for $40 back then. It's less than $5 now. You just get that on somebody else's machine and you can record everything they say or do that the camera can catch and the mic can catch, or the mic can catch. So you do the same thing, by the way, on phones as well and tablets.
Wow.
So all of that is just, they've had decades to develop this stuff. They've learned from the best. They've stolen from the NSA. Some of the best 7 tools the NSA had, they stole back in 2015 or 2016. And they've been able to emulate what we pioneered with the Stuxnet virus. That was a virus inside of a virus inside of a virus, and targeted only a certain type of computer. In that case, it was a Siemens SCADA environment. PLC is what I was trying to think of. Programmable logic controller. In that case, it was just targeted at 3 different models of the Siemens brand, and because that's what Iran was using to improve or refine their uranium. But hackers have taken that and now they can go after Apple. They can go after Android devices. They can go after, of course, Windows being the more popular because it's the bigger market. But they can go after financial services. They can do any of that. If they install a keylogger, which is extremely easy to do on your system, along with a backdoor or with something that transmits the information, everything that you type into your computer now gets transmitted to them. So your bank account, your password, everything you need to go, either they have a backdoor to come in and harvest the data whenever they want to, or they have it transmit to them at 2 in the morning or whenever they want it.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, you're talking about the hot topics, you think, and you said, cybersecurity was up last year, but you had COVID, you had an election. So you had a lot of people clicking on exciting stuff or, that type of thing. In fact, I've even seen, the emails are getting more sophisticated. You talk about, like, again, I was in the financial services. So there was fraud early on when you get like those calls, and then after a while, you hear that and you think, who falls for that stuff anymore, right? And of course, there's still people that simply do, I'm going to wire money or whatever, but they're getting so much more sophisticated. I mean, I've got even now to where I'll see emails come in where you scroll down to unsubscribe, down below, and you're like, wait a minute, that looks different. That doesn't look like, and then that can possibly take you to an issue that'll cause you problems. That's amazing.
Yeah.
That is amazing.
If you know for a fact that you subscribe to this and it's recent enough that you trust that, unsubscribing is okay. But 9 times out of 10, when you're finally ready to unsubscribe from something, you don't know if you subscribe to it or if it's the same publication. So just use your junk, whatever you're using to sort your email, use your junk file to put that in, and don't, because as soon as you hit unsubscribe, you raised your hand. If it's a cyber criminal, oh, this guy's live. This is obviously legitimate and he's reading him. So let's send him something else. And it won't be from that thing that you're trying to unsubscribe from. It'll be from something that now they know your interest and what you pay attention to. It'll be from that direction.
That's crazy. That's a great tip. Using that junk file. That's a great tip. You think about with the businesses, what type of risk do they need to be concerned about? I know you've covered some of that, but is there any particular risk that they should be focusing on?
I think almost all risk, almost all attacks start with social engineering. Almost all of them do. They need you to be interested to respond. So whether that response is on the phone, or it's through an email, or it's through a text, or it may just be something online, maybe an ad on some website, legitimate website that you're looking at. If you click on it, a lot of times they call it clickbait. If you're at the downside of an article, the bottom of an article, and there's all these interesting things to take a look at, and cute puppies out, whatever it might be, and you click on that, well, you'll go there. But they've used social engineering to tantalize you, to get your curiosity up. So if you get an email from someone that you don't know, don't click on it. If you get an email from someone that you did not solicit, but you do know them, pick up the phone and say, hey, Larry, I just got an email from you with an attachment or a link, or I just got an email from you. Did we discuss that? Is this really from you? If you say no, then I know I need to get rid of that thing as quick as I can get rid of it.
Yeah.
And definitely don't click on it. If you get something from your mother, she'll appreciate the call.
That's
and
right.
just pick up the phone and ask her, did you send this to me?
Yeah. I suppose there's a difference between just reading somebody's email and then clicking on things, just kind of taking that next step. I want to kind of move into that updates, but before I do, because I want to know who our villains are, if you will. And in your book, I don't know if you've got a copy of your book you can kind of show there. Mine's in the other room. Yeah. So staying safe in a dangerous world, think before you click, which is what we were talking about. In there, you talk about white hats, black hats, and gray hats. Could you kind of, for the listeners, define, you do in your book, but I'd like to hear it verbally from your mouth.
I appreciate that. I appreciate the opportunity to show the book. I usually forget to do that. Thank you. So those that are old enough to remember the old Westerns will recall that in the beginning of movies and even television, when Westerns were big, the good guys always wore a white hat and the bad guys always wore a black hat. And everything was black and white in those days. So you didn't have to, you wouldn't have known red or blue probably anyway, but you could tell black and white. So it's it's exactly that same way. A good hat hacker is going to be the guy that goes through programs and looks at what's going on the web, and he'll see a vulnerability in Windows, or he'll see a vulnerability in Office, Microsoft Office, and he'll report it to Microsoft. He'll say, I've discovered this vulnerability. It's when you do this, or it's on, most of them have source code. They go through that. And I don't want to get too deep in the weeds. You and I are not going to see source code on Windows, but hackers steal source code. And the reason for that is because it's written in a language that has to be compiled. The compiled version goes on the computer that you and I look at, and it's machine code at that point. It's ones and zeros. And there are a few people that can read that. They're wired a little different from us. The financial district calls them quants, quantitative analysts, but often they've got Asperger's, or they've got something else that, sometimes it shorts them over here. If you watch The Big Bang Theory, Sheldon is probably that guy. He's brilliant in this arena, but he lacks in others. My brother was like that. His was calendar. I had a brother who's passed away now, but he had autism, and if you told him the date that you were born, he not only always remembered that, but he also told you immediately you were born on Wednesday and whatever it was. He knew the day. He just somehow, and I don't know how it works, but he did. There are people like that that can read source code. Most of them, though, or that read machine code, most of them read source code. And what they'll do is they'll report it to the individual. Apple shocked everybody a few years ago when they first told everyone they wouldn't allow third-party antivirus software to run because they felt that their operating iOS was secure and they didn't need that. And so then a good deal of the hackers took that as a challenge and went after that. So then they came out the following year with a bounty, and that's what it's called, a bug bounty, of $1 million if you could find a vulnerability in their operating system. Now, to the best of my knowledge, nobody collected on that, and Apple surely would not advertise it if they did. But that's a white hat hacker. A black hat hacker is the exact opposite. He's the guy that looks through the source code. He looks for those vulnerabilities, and they don't all have to read because the dark web is full of all kinds, even the World Wide Web. When there's a vulnerability spotted, it's printed everywhere. It's publicized everywhere. Oh, this has just been found. And since most people don't do their updates, you still got a good shot at doing it if you're a black hat hacker of finding that vulnerability out there. If you own Microsoft, if you're a hacker that specializes in Windows or Office vulnerabilities, once a month they send updates out. Well, almost all of those updates, it's called Patch Tuesday. They're usually on the second or the third Tuesday of the month, usually the second. Almost all of them deal with security issues. And so if you don't update, well, you're still at risk for that. Microsoft has patched that vulnerability. Hackers now get those too, and they know what those vulnerabilities are. And so they modify existing, called malware, malicious software. They modify that to attack that vulnerability that now they know about thanks to Microsoft. So that's a black hat hacker. They go after the vulnerabilities. The gray hat guy, he's the middle of the road guy. You know, he's got to pay the rent this month. He's a little short. Hey, he'll send out a little ransomware. He'll do a little dance or something. On the other hand, you know, he might, gee, I've just found this. Microsoft will pay me, you know, $5,000 for it. And I'm a little hot from that last escapade I did. You know, maybe I better cool it. I'll just report this to Microsoft. He straddles the fence. If he thinks he can make a killing in this area, well, he'll go do it. And if he thinks it's safer over there, he'll do that.
It's almost like hacker for hire, right?
Exactly.
Just fighting the ethics between good and bad. I can see the two hackers on each shoulder, right? You're trying to listen to which one is.
Well, and you actually have that too. You have corporate espionage has never been more popular than it is now, thanks to the internet. And so you may look for a gray hat hacker. You know, if you're that lack of integrity, that corporate owner, that you want to get an edge on your competition, you know, you might pay that guy. He's not going to out there to spoil the competition. He's not out there to do him in or to extort money from him, because he's getting paid by you, the owner with the lack of integrity. He's just out there to find stuff that you can use, data that you can use. What's that intellectual property you have? I mean, that happens on a daily basis too. It isn't written about as much, but that's your gray hat hacker as well.
Okay. Well, we've got about 10 minutes left in the show here. I want to focus kind of on that updates. You were touching on it before, but maybe take us in terms of just siloing a little bit for some of our listeners like me that are, you know, maybe like single business owners or small, you know, when we're thinking about, you know, Norton 360 and McAfee and, you know, those things. And there's limitations, I assume, on those. But maybe talk to us about how we kind of protect, and then transition maybe into some of your bigger clients and just some of the general things they should be thinking about in terms of updates and things like that.
Excellent. Thank you. So the little guy, the mom and pop, the small to mid-sized business, there are some things that you need to do. I'll talk about the Fortune 500, the larger corporation in just a minute, but everybody can have strong passwords. Imagine your front door. I mean, you can put bars on all the windows and the back door and everything else. If your front door is standing wide open, that's where people are going to come in. So that's the password. Make it long and strong. Use a password manager. You're going to spend 50 to 75 bucks a year if you're an individual for a good password manager, and they're easy to find out. Just go online and Google the top 3 or the top 5 password management programs. 50 to 75 a year. If you're a coffee drinker, you spend more than that on coffee. Yeah. So that's over and done. The next thing is updates. Again, it doesn't matter how safe Microsoft or Apple makes their operating systems. If you don't apply the updates when they send them to you, then you're still at risk for everything that's been resolved. So do it, and do it as quickly as possible. It's often said that Patch Tuesday is followed by Hacker Wednesday, because now the bad guys know what to attack. Mm-hmm. So do the updates. Once in a while, I've not heard of a problem with Apple. I did years ago. Apple had one issue where they'd sent out an update too early and it affected some people. Microsoft has it happen every blue moon, maybe once a year, max twice a year, where they'll send out an update too soon and it needs to be fixed, but then they follow it with an update. If you don't do it when it comes out, then you're at risk until you do it. So do the updates, do them as soon as you can. And don't forget all your other devices. Your router has operating system. If you have a firewall appliance, it has an operating system. You have a modem, it has an operating system. All that stuff gets updated, and you probably don't get an automatic update from them unless you've paid for it through some sort of service. So that requires you go out to their website, see if there's new updates to download. And maybe you do that with those things, maybe quarterly, wouldn't hurt monthly, but if you don't have time, maybe quarterly, because they come out either as needed or on an annual basis. And you have no way of knowing unless they tell you when they're coming out.
I'm going to jump in. I'm going to jump in before you go to the bigger companies, but just for your listeners. So what I hear is making sure that the password management programs are having strength. These are for us individuals and us smaller businesses. Update often, going in. I'm sure somebody smarter than me could tell me there's probably a way to have automatic updates, I think, over the night, things like that. I never thought about router. You know, I don't go into my router all that often, you know, and things like that, but you got the phone, all those things. So keeping those updated. And then I would imagine a good protection program like a Norton or a Webroot or McAfee or something like that makes sense. Is that fair?
Exactly right. And there's things to consider. We're almost out of time, so I won't go into the ins and outs. There's things to consider on the antivirus, anti-malware stuff. All the brands you just mentioned are all good brands. Look at their website. VPN, especially with work from home. You know, all the employees that are suddenly working from home this last year that never had before. If you've got kids, chances are they're not as observant where they go on the web as you are. If they pick up one of those viruses, bring it home to your router that you haven't updated, and now you catch it as a result of that. That's your work computer. So now when you tie into the corporate computer or the corporate server, you infect that network, when it can just explode from one little infection to your child's, went to what they thought was a legitimate website. Kids' websites are all the time being hacked.
Yeah.
Because kids don't think of security. They don't care about that stuff. They're kids.
They just click on it. Yeah, my wife works for federal and a state job, and when she was during COVID, she had to work from home, and she had to bring her own cords in and her own, and it couldn't hook to anything in our home other than I think direct in our router, but nevertheless, there was all these protections. And I would think on the companies you consult in, as we're wrapping up on a bigger scale, you work with larger companies as well, that they have to be concerned about all those things as well.
They have to be concerned about all those things and many more. You get into firewalls, You get into, if you've got staff working at home, they really should have their own connection that only they use with their company computer. When you start mixing personal and business together on anything, now you've got other issues to deal with, especially if you have compliance issues. So you're keeping track of the time, so I don't want to over talk.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I tell you, and all the times I've been on this podcast, I've been dying to say this, but we're on the information playground today. So I've been dying to say that. But what I want to leave you with, Ron, is, tell the listeners, how they reach you. And maybe one, if you've got one last tip or something you want us to consider with cybersecurity, and then I'll let you go ahead and bring it home for us.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, it's been a pleasure. It really has. It felt a little different. I hesitate to use the word awkward, but a little different. But man, you did a great job. You should be doing this instead of me. I thank you for the opportunity to talk about a subject I'm very passionate about. I think the best thing that any individual or any company can do is learn, educate yourself. There's too much to know and too many risks to deal with if you don't seek out the information. The mainstream press concentrates on whatever sells, whether it's papers or ratings, whatever it is. They're a business just like the rest of us, and most of their reporters, unless they've got a reporter they've devoted to cybersecurity, most of them aren't going to understand this. They don't know any more than you do. And their attention is going to be, they're covering a war one day, they're covering a bank robbery the next day. They don't have time to get into all this. It's up to you. It's up to you to protect yourself. We can't afford to put a policeman on every corner or one in every home just to make sure your home's protected. You've got to protect yourself. You lock your doors, you got to lock up your computer at the same time, as well as your phone and your tablet. And you've got to educate your family and your other employees too. Everybody, this is everybody's fight. It isn't just the big guys, it's everyone's fight. So that said, Larry, thank you for being my guest today.
Yeah. Well, thank you. You were a wonderful interviewee, and it's insightful to listen. When you hear these stories on the news, Ron, they're lagging stories, in the fact that it's probably somewhere back, whether it was a week or a month or 6 months ago, some company didn't protect themselves the way they did. And when I think about your company, from being able to help people with assessments and the policies, the procedures, the training, and the cybersecurity, what you're doing is protecting America's business. So hats off to you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. If you want to reach Larry, you can catch him at
boilingfrogdevelopment@gmail.com.
and Ron at ronbushconsulting.com. Check out our website. Send me an email if you've got questions, thoughts. If you're interested in the radio program, the radio version of the program, check out WVLP. We're on there Monday mornings from 8 to 9 and rebroadcast on Fridays from 1 to 2, and that's Central Time. It's in Northwest Indiana. Check us out on demand on podcast platforms like Apple Podcast and Google Podcast and Spotify, or check us out on YouTube, all under the Information Playground. So thank you for being with us today. I usually give you the last word, Larry, after I do all that.
It's all you.
I will ask everyone to, if you have liked today's program, let us know. If you've gotten anything out of this, let us know that. Let WVLP, it's info@wvlp.org. Check out their website. You can email from their website. And take to heart what we've talked about. There isn't any of this that is outside anybody's reach. It's a matter of education. It's a matter of learning, but it's really a matter of giving your attention to it. It isn't that we can outsmart the smartest guys on the bad side, but we can certainly make it more difficult and time consuming. And chances are they'll go somewhere else. There's enough people that have let me in and QWERTY and password 123 as a password. Don't do that. Do the smart stuff. Thank you for being with us. Bye for now.